Good morning, Doug.
Hey, good morning.
I was moving a little slowly here. I haven't got the disclaimer up for you all. I wanted to make sure you guys are all safe out there. So I'm going to get that up here quickly so you don't find yourself at unnecessary risk by watching this show.
And if you did find yourself in risk of watching or unnecessary risk because of watching this show or anything else, what would you do?
What would you do risk-wise?
No, what would you do if you found yourself in a risk that you didn't want to be in?
Take a left or a right.
Get out.
Get off that road, whatever that road is. Make a turn. Hey, 37 years ago today, I sat for hours writing.
No one can see you.
Taking a Series 7, 37 years ago today.
Hey, if you can see that, I was high five Keith. The Series 7 is a entrance exam to allow you to become a financial professional, to serve clients, to have clients. Well, you didn't have any clients, to go find some clients.
I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything. I probably I took the test at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and I probably had to run up my credit card just to have gasoline to get to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah. And it's a shout out today to Lynn and Russ. Happy 37th anniversary. I was there for their wedding, and I was supposed to be a groomsman, but I had to take the test, and we didn't know if I could get to the wedding on time.
Where was the wedding?
On Duquesne University's campus.
That's why you took the test there?
Yeah.
That's amazing that you're able to schedule that.
It took a little bit. I mean, because Hilliard Lyons wasn't the bureaucracy of a Merrill Lynch or somebody like that, but by having a smaller organization, you could talk to somebody and help them they could help understand. Because I'd taken it to Indianapolis, I wouldn't have been able to celebrate Russ and Lynn.
There are a lot of barriers to entry to this business, and that's the biggest one.
Yeah. I was a nerd because I love that stuff. I wanted in this business so badly that like studying that wasn't work. It was like
you loved it.
I loved it. I was like
I remember when I was studying, and this is just part of me, but when I was studying that, I remember thinking, this isn't how the real world works.
Yeah.
As I would read stuff.
Yeah. I mean, what you find out with the Series 7 is not how to help you guys. That's not what the Series 7 is. The Series 7 essentially teaches you how people have tried to rip you off over the years. It's rules and regulations, and then you realize all those rules and regulations were because the regulators can't regulate, and so when they would screw up and didn't catch a criminal, they just add a new rule. Yeah, and so then you, as the advisor, has to know the rule because some other criminal did something, and so I found the history of the market. I still find the history very fascinating. It's just like, really, they did that and got away with it, right?
That's impressive. Well, hey, congratulations. That is a really big deal. And for all of you, you've probably have some guests who may have taken the Series 7. It's a big hurdle to jump over.
Yeah, and congratulations to Russ and Lynn. I watched a podcast a couple of weeks ago, The Art of Manliness. It was a divorce attorney talking about the benefit of marriage and why marriage is worth it from a divorce attorney. But 46% of first-time marriages in divorce, and 56% of all marriages in divorce. And so to make it 37 years, Russ is retiring this year, I think, and to be in a high-profile, aggressive role like that, and to make it 37 years is a major accomplishment.
I hear data like that, and in my circle, that's not the case. Yeah, that math wouldn't work in my circle.
It did in my circle right out of college. I was in like 10 or 15 weddings right out of college, and there was a pretty high. It might have been average. It might have been an average failure rate in that, which it would seem even harder today because it's communication today. I think is worse than when I got married, and it's not being reinforced how to communicate better. So I'd say communication is the main.
That's what Larry Clark told me. He said, just make sure you're a good communicator. Communicate with Caroline. That was good advice, Larry.
Yeah. I was telling somebody else that's the benefit Connie and I have. We're both kind of communicate in not an aggressive manner. We're just pretty soft, kind of kind of easy going with the communication. So
What is this all about? I found this on your shelf over here, and what's going on?
one,
And Keith and I, we don't talk about this stuff. I just saw this like 2 minutes ago, so I wanted to let you in on the joy of whatever this is on Keith's shelf.
I'm a pretty private guy. I don't explain everything I do, right? Like I just do stuff and then you may or may not hear about it. But my friend Bob Warren taught me probably 20, 30 years ago. He called it the principle of the cross. The essence of it is do things for what other people get out of it and not what you get out of it.
Okay, so
And this chair squeaked so loudly, I thought it was annoying everybody in the office. So I remembered this morning to bring it in to give everybody.
have you guys ever noticed Keith's chair squeaking?
It hasn't.
I can't hear you because of the squeaking.
Amanda?
Yeah, but I didn't realize it.
Same here. No one knew until right now.
Yeah, so that's why it was gonna be anonymous anyway. Now you guys are in on it.
No,
This
it was
small-
not here.
This small can, this is a small can, and this looks like it's 30 years old. So this tells you how much Keith uses this stuff.
Yeah, this one was this was in my RV. This was my RV. Like there are squeaks and noises in an RV that will drive you over. Yeah, no, you can't cure the noises in an RV with this. You have to learn. And this squeak is part of like my annoyance in the RV. We're driving down the road. I'll hear dishes rattling and they're going, "Oh, Dad is losing his mind." I'm like, go put something on those dishes. So yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Thanks for looking out for us.
Yeah, you guys were on my mind. You didn't even know it. So there you go. All right. What do we let's talk about the market a little bit here. Give me a sec.
I was listening in to one of our friends, Mark Minervini, and he was talking about the stock market and about the Federal Reserve rate hikes that we've been seeing. And one of the things that he had highlighted is there's going to be a meeting that takes place next week on September 20th at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. is when they always do this kind of stuff. But he was highlighting the odds of a rate hike in the future. And no one knows the future, but we sure can talk about it and have an opinion about it. And it seems like the odds makers do not believe there's going to be another rate hike. And so that could be good for a bull market, or if there is a rate hike, that could be really bad. And so this past week hey, this is the kind of stuff I like to see, is we've been leveling off. And if we look at the prices on the NASDAQ all the way to the right, you can see the lines have tightened up a little bit.
So really, you're talking right in here, Doug, between here and here, it's tightened up.
Yeah, the prices haven't been, they haven't had as much movement up or down. They've just been tightening up as we wait and see what happens. And so this is just a stock index. The stock index is made up of individual stocks. So you have to take a look under the hood and see what stocks are in here. But nevertheless, it looks like the NASDAQ is waiting to see what's going to happen with the meeting.
And the fact that there's not a lot of volatility in there, I think is really a positive thing. But I think it's they call this the high risk, the stress point right here.
Yeah.
It's
Stress points.
It's going to do something. It's
Yeah.
right on the 50-day moving average. We're optimists. We'd love for it to go up from here, right? But our emotions aren't attached to the fact that it's got to do what we want it to do. It's going to do what it's going to do next week. And so it looks like something's going to happen next week, whether it's next week or a couple weeks out. All those moving averages are converging. The stock price is flattening, or the index price is flattening out, and just pretty straightforward. It's got something going on.
We've spoken with several of you over the past couple of weeks, and we know August was a rough month. We had a really good month in July. August was tough, but the last couple of weeks just been holding steady. And Keith is highlighting the S&P 500 now, and that picture doesn't look a whole lot different than the NASDAQ. So things are just kind of settling down. Theme we've been talking about on this show is stocks have more competition than ever right now with where short-term interest rates are. You look at a short-term interest rate, think about like a CD, what you could get on a 1-year CD, and what you can get on a 1-year CD right now compared to 2022, 2021, 2020, 2019, it's like light years difference. And so these stocks are receiving a lot of competition as the value for your dollar continues. Even the dividend type paying stocks, are receiving competition because, the dividend might be there. The opportunity for capital growth can be tied to it, but the safety of just doing nothing is decent.
It is. Your competition is great. Like the idea of having competition freaks people out, but in reality, we haven't had a competitive investment market for a while, and so it made everybody feel like rocket scientists with the stock market. Their stocks were going up, and they just buy and hold, and just think that's the way the world is, and it may or may not be. We don't know.
Something interesting I've noticed in the big stocks, what do they call them? The fantastic or the marvelous seven. I mean, you hear all these different descriptions of these high-tech type stocks. Is in the last few days, I've noticed that there's been some that have been going up and some that have been going down. And so we've seen like this divergence in price between some of the big type tech names. And I like to see that because that, again, is a fight for investment capital. Where is it going to be treated best and why? And so even though you might have a stock that is one of those household names that everybody knows, that everybody uses, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great investment. Could be a great company.
I think one of the things that probably you all might not even realize that we do, Doug and I buy individual stocks for ourselves. We don't buy the same ones for you because the regulatory environment makes it harder for us to buy the same ones we're in with you. But I just look at whether I'm doing okay with those stocks that I own or not. And if I'm not, it generally tells me the market's a little rougher. But I was updating some of that data last night, and one of those that just hit a stop price that I got stopped out of a week or so ago was down 10% more. Like I hadn't watched it that much, and it had just kind of free fallen down from where it was.
I know which one you're talking
I was
about.
like,
and Mark Minervini or Patrick, one of our friends, I'll credit them. They say your first loss is your best loss.
Yeah,
And that makes a lot of sense because a lot of times when something starts to go down, other people get on board with that. And Keith and I love trends. We believe in trends, and so if there's something that's going one direction, it takes something greater to make it go another direction. And a lot of times with stocks, they just keep going.
yeah. I texted you earlier. I said, let's talk about slopes today because I think slopes are really they're a good psychological idea to understand. They're a good investment idea to understand. They're a good life principle to understand. And I was sending a shout out to Russ and Lynn earlier. And one of the most interesting things I've ever done is early on when he was a young pilot, I went to Luke Air Force Base to visit him in the west side of Phoenix. And I'm standing, this was pre 9/11, so I'm standing literally on the tarmac. Like there's nobody, like I'm just standing with clothes like just a schmuck out on the tarmac. And these are some of the baddest planes in the US Air Force, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting out there watching these dudes. Like it's noisy, and they're lining up on their these young pilots are just they look like the middle linebacker for a college football. There are hundreds of them. They all look the same way, right? And these dudes are getting in these F-15Es, I think what they were, and you just hear whoa, and just one after the other taking off the runway, and then they'd be flying low, right? Like the Top Gun kind of stuff. Circling around, and they would be going like this, and all of a sudden, I don't even know what they do. They just shoot straight up. I don't know if you've ever seen that in real life. My head was just, and I don't know how long I stood there. I was just watching it and thinking, what in the world? But what happened with that slope when they went to like that, they could only do that. I don't even know how. It wasn't long. It wasn't 15 seconds because they were moving so fast. But what would happen is they would hit the pinnacle of that. And I don't know if they shut their motor off or if the motor stalled, and they would come back down at the exact same slope. And you're sitting there, you're thinking they're going to hit the pavement, and they get control of it, flatten out, and take off into the horizon. And so that was one of the slopes that hit my mind, is that if you're going on just an ordinary like trip in an airplane, it'll have a different slope at takeoff than it will in the flight. And so slopes are really helpful, I think, in just thinking about life itself.
That's exciting. I cannot imagine what that was like to see. And I've been to air shows, and that to be right on the deck, that would be incredible.
It was like there wasn't a phone back then where you could,
Right.
so it was just like a personal experience that you just absorbed it and just like, wow.
Slopes, I felt this bring Caroline Shrieve. She's a math teacher, algebra teacher, and I see her working on slopes all the time. You guys have taken algebra, you remember your days of mathematics, and we're looking at slopes all the time through stock charts.
What about, let me show you a slope that kind of made me think about it. Let me get this picture up on my screen here. I double clicked it here. This is the one I wanted to talk about initially, to point out life to people, because what you think and what you thought may be limited by just a short-term memory, right? Like, so your reality, what you think is true may or may not be true.
Fair enough.
So, for example, if you've grown up since 1980, you really haven't endured a difficult economy. The 1960, a lot of pre-1960, but 1970 was a difficult economy. And then the 80s, tax rates started coming down, and the economy has really been pretty good. They call it the Great Recession of 2008. I don't really think that I don't even think that could compare to what was going on in the 70s. Like, if you go back and look at it, they were eating horse meat in the 1970s. I don't remember hearing any of that in 2008. So here's the slope that caught my mind. This is G7 represents the biggest economic countries in the world, right? The biggest power forces. And so this shows the real housing prices. So it's when you see real, it's saying inflation adjusted. If we take inflation out of it and said, what's really happened to the housing prices? So if I had $1 that maintained the same value, would that dollar buy my house the same amount? And so what you see since the year 2000, these different colored lines represent different economies and the slope of those. So like, if you were wanting a reasonable place relative to 2000 to live for housing costs, it would suggest that you would move to Japan.
Right.
Does that make sense? Because that slope is flat and downward a little bit. Ironically, the place you don't want to move to is just north of US. Canada's housing has a slope that's not sustainable. Like, it had a similar slope that some of the other economies did. It flattened out, and then it's just gone off the roof.
So in thinking through that, what's the cause? What's going on?
Well, I think you have more risk. You have some socialist economies in here, but I think the more socialized you go, the less free enterprise adapting to those things may be one thing. A political system that gets out of control might do the same thing.
Regulation.
All kinds of things filter into it. And if I could take this chart, and I didn't take the time to go back, and if you did, so this is basically a little more than a 20-year chart. So if I went from 1970 to 1990-ish, if I did the same chart with these same countries, and I'm just going from memory, so I didn't go research it, there would be another country whose name is up here. Any guess?
I would think China.
Well, they're not on our list here. So
on the list. Well, I don't know. Who is it?
Japan. Have you seen the movie Gung Ho?
No.
Michael Keaton.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're saying like back in the
From 1970 to 1990.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So if you want a weekend show to watch this weekend, Gung Ho, check it out. It'll take you back in time to what was going on in the late 80s. In the late 80s, in business, what was going on is all the American businesses were hiring these business consultants to teach Japanese management.
Okay,
because we're not smart enough here. We need to do it. We're screwing things up in America. We need a Japanese way. In Japan in the late 80s or the early 1990s, just going from memory, what they did, their housing prices were going at this slope right here, and the solution they had was 3-generation mortgages, 100-year mortgage.
so you're forecasting that Canada, like the F-15E that's taken off, might have a different slope if we were to look out 20 more years.
Well, I'm just saying, if you look at if you would have saw Japan, it wasn't sustainable. Like, can you imagine being a 10-year-old living with grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, and just kind of trying to figure out, like, I guess this, because probably that's what was going on in the last 30 years in Japan, but they still have what, 60 years left on this mortgage. And so you're 10 and you're like, I guess everybody lives with grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and then you get to like 18 and you're like, wait a minute, I'm on the mortgage.
I think I would have refied at those negative interest rates.
I don't know what they did. Yeah, I don't know what they did, but it slowed down the supply and demand of housing in Japan. And that's what I've been thinking about this thing, is like, what's gonna, like, housing, that may be similar to what California looks like in the United States. Something has to happen. Like your administrative people in Canada or California can't afford to live in a city. They can't, and at some point when the housing prices go up too far, they have to commute too far that it doesn't make any sense. So you don't have workers in it. And so what ultimately happened, the F-15E had to come down. Something happened to the left here with Japan that flattened it out. And so everything works that way. That
Everything.
Yeah. So when Caitlin and I were hiking the Inca Trail, we were hiking up, but it doesn't keep going up. It has to come down at some point. And so that's what I'm saying. The slope of things is really interesting if you pay attention to them.
And the stock market, the thing I think about it, it prices that slope every second of the day from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. With housing, it's a little different because who knows the value of your house?
Right.
Or you can think about used car prices over the past 2 years. Their slope has just been amazing. But right now, it's been coming back down. And so, yeah, these trends, they tend to go up, they tend to go down just as fast.
And I would also point out that I think the higher a slope is in anything, whether it's economic things, whether it's your
Health related.
health, whether it's education, like your grades, or whether it's adventuresome lifestyle.
Yeah.
The higher the slope, the more emotional it gets.
Oh man, that's true.
Yeah. And so the higher the slope, the more challenging to make good decisions. Yeah. Like when Caitlin and I were hiking the Andes Mountains, there were emotional times. Like I got psyched out a time or two on that because of the emotions involved with that. It's skiing. I'm not a skier, but I assume if you hit but the reason people do that is they want that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so if you want higher rates of returns in the market, you just have to take higher slope risk, just like in anything else. It's not like somebody else is offering, like when you're out interviewing financial advisors, if those of you are watching or trying to do that, somebody isn't going to be able to give you a free ride. Like for you to get a higher rate of return, you've got to take a higher slope.
Yeah. Yeah. And the data that is used might not be the data that reflects the type of slope that is reality for you.
Right. People don't communicate these ideas to investors. And that whole historical thing is that if you've only been alive during a bull market, if you've only lived during a bull market, you don't have the history besides things. And so with that slope so we were pointing out the slope on Canada, and it looked like, well, Japan's a low risk place to go for housing. Well, it wasn't at one point in time.
Yeah. Right.
And so the same thing is true if I pull up the Nikkei, I think is how you count. Like the Japanese stock market was doing the exact same thing. And I'm pretty sure if you looked at the Japanese market today and compared it to 1990, it still hasn't got back to 1990.
Brutal.
And that can happen in any economy. And so to just say, oh, it'll recover, it'll be fine. may or may not be true. I don't know. I just know in Japan, as an example, it didn't recover.
Maybe for that third generation.
Right. And so things are cyclical, there's slopes,
Yeah.
like Japan might be a reasonable risk today in the stock market. I haven't even looked at it because I don't know, I don't own anything Japanese.
No, I don't think we do.
Yeah, no, I'm saying even like my pen, I don't think it's Japanese, or
Oh.
my phone, or,
Your car.
oh. I do have Japanese cars. I'll have to go look at the Japanese car stocks, see how they're doing. That's a pretty big expenditure right there, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, this was my rampage today. I was just thinking of slopes, and
Well,
and
that's
I think
good.
that chart's what caused. I before I saw that, I had no idea how rough it is in Canada. Like our neighbors to the north are struggling.
Yeah, I had no idea either. That's brutal.
Yeah, just studying economic situations helped me personally have more compassion towards other people. Like you just think everything's
Yeah.
peaceful.
Economics and compassion.
Yeah, and
Wow.
looking at for the other guy. This is a very.
Who would have thought?
Have you guys ever seen that part of Keith, the touchy-feely part? I don't know. Have you?
It's out there. Come in and visit him in his squeaky chair.
What else do we need to talk about today, Doug?
Nothing. Enjoy the trend of a good weekend. We're starting off right. It's beautiful. And so hope you really enjoy it.
Yeah, this has been one of my most favorite shows that we've had. I've had a lot of fun. I'll see you guys soon.